Lucas had never trusted Helena, but nothing could have prepared him for the proposal she threw at him that evening. Sitting across from her in the dimly lit dining room, he felt a sense of dread creeping up his spine. Helena, his father's second wife and now the puppet master of the family empire, stared at him with that cold, calculating gaze she always wore. "You'll marry Mia," she said without preamble, her voice as sharp as the clinking crystal glasses on the table. Lucas blinked, stunned, leaning back in his chair as if he hadn't heard her correctly. "What?" His voice was barely a whisper. He hadn't even heard of a Mia, let alone considered marrying anyone. Helena's lips curled into a thin smile, the kind that always made him feel like a pawn in one of her sinister games. "You heard me, Lucas. You will marry Mia. It's not a request. Why would I marry someone I don't even know?" He tried to sound assertive, but there was a crack in his voice, a hint of the fear he felt whenever Helena was involved. "Because if you don't," Helena continued, slowly sipping her wine, "everything your father built, everything you stand to inherit, will disappear. The company, the estate, the respectability, it's all hanging by a thread. One wrong move, and it's over. This marriage will ensure the stability we need." Lucas clenched his fists beneath the table, his mind racing. His career and reputation were tied directly to his father's legacy. He had spent years working to prove himself, to earn a seat at the table with the family's powerful allies. But this? Marrying a woman he had never met? "And who exactly is this Mia?" he asked, trying to regain control of the conversation. He needed to understand why Helena would force him into something so absurd. Helena leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "Mia, well, she's a nobody. Homeless, to be precise." Lucas blinked in shock. "Homeless? You want me to marry a homeless woman? This is a joke, right?" "Oh, I'm very serious, Lucas. Mia is the perfect candidate for what I need." Helena's smile was more of a sneer now, her tone dripping with malice. "You'll bring her into our world, parade her around, and by the time the vultures get a whiff of her, it'll be too late for anyone to react. Your name will be dirt. Your father's empire will be mine." Lucas felt the room spin. The cold reality of the situation began to sink in. Helena wasn't just manipulating him into a marriage. She was setting him up for public humiliation. It was clear she wanted to ruin him, destroy his name, his reputation, and any claim he had to his father's legacy. But he couldn't back down. Not yet. "And if I refuse?" Lucas's voice was hard, masking the growing anxiety in his chest. Helena's eyes narrowed. "If you refuse, I will tear you apart. I know things, Lucas. Things about your past, about your father. You have no idea how deep this goes. I can destroy you with a single word." For a moment, Lucas was speechless, the weight of her threat sinking in. He had always suspected Helena had her claws deeper in the family than anyone realized. But now it was clear. She controlled everything. His mind raced, looking for a way out. He couldn't afford to lose everything, not after all he had worked for. But the idea of marrying a woman he didn't know, a woman from the streets, was insane. Yet, Helena's eyes told him there was no escape. Not without consequences. After what felt like an eternity, he nodded, his jaw clenched tight. "Fine, I'll marry her." Helena's smile widened, victory flashing across her face. "Good. I knew you'd make the right choice." Lucas stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor as he pushed it back. He needed air. He needed to think. "Where do I find her?" he asked, not bothering to mask the bitterness in his voice. "She's in the city," Helena replied smoothly. "The streets, to be more precise. You'll find her easily enough. Her name has already been arranged with the necessary contacts. You just need to make her your wife." Lucas turned and walked out of the room, his mind a chaotic storm of anger, confusion, and disbelief. As he stepped out into the cool evening air, he realized that this was no longer about his father's legacy or the family's reputation. This was personal. Helena had crossed a line, and he would find a way to make her pay for it. But first, he had to find Mia, the woman who was about to become his wife. The city streets were colder than usual, with a biting wind that swept through the alleyways and across Lucas's face as he drove through the downtown area. His mind was a mess. Mia, homeless, and now, soon to be his wife. The absurdity of it all gnawed at him, but Helena's threats were fresh in his mind. He had no choice. He slowed the car as he approached a rundown block, the kind of place people like him rarely visited. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows along the sidewalks littered with the remnants of a life people had forgotten. His chest tightened. How had it come to this? Lucas parked the car, stepping out into the cold evening air. His heart pounded in his chest as he walked, searching for the woman Helena had forced into his life. He scanned the faces of people huddled on benches or gathered in small groups, their eyes reflecting the same hardship and weariness that seemed to cling to every corner of this part of the city. Then, he saw her. Mia sat alone near the entrance of an abandoned building, her knees pulled to her chest, wrapped in an oversized coat that had seen better days. Her hair fell in tangled waves around her face, partially hiding her features. Lucas stopped, his breath catching in his throat. He recognized her. No, not just from Helena's description, but from something deep in his past. It couldn't be. She looked up, her eyes locking with his. For a split second, neither of them moved. There was something in her gaze that was familiar, something that pulled at memories Lucas had long buried. "Mia?" he asked, his voice uncertain, almost as if he was trying to confirm a ghost from his past. Her eyes narrowed, scanning his face with a mixture of recognition and suspicion. "Lucas?" Her voice was hoarse, as if unused to speaking. There was no warmth in her tone, only confusion and a guarded wariness. The realization hit Lucas like a punch to the gut. Mia wasn't a stranger. She was someone from his childhood. A girl he used to know, someone he had played with before everything in his life became complicated by wealth and family expectations. But she had disappeared from his life, just like that, vanishing as if she had never existed. What are you doing here?" Her question wasn't accusatory, but it wasn't welcoming either. She glanced around, as if unsure whether she should be talking to him. Lucas swallowed hard. How was he supposed to explain this? How could he tell her that Helena had forced him into this situation, that he had come to make her his wife because of some twisted scheme? None of it made sense, even to him. "I need to talk to you," Lucas began, keeping his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "There's a situation." Mia let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "A situation? You mean like being homeless?" "Yeah, I'm in a situation too, Lucas." Her words cut deep, and Lucas had to remind himself that she didn't know the full story, how this wasn't something he wanted either. But as he stood there, facing her, it became painfully clear that this wasn't just about his family anymore. This was about her, about what had happened to Mia, the girl who had once been part of his past, now sitting on the cold, unforgiving streets. "I'm serious, Mia," he said softly, stepping closer, though he could feel the tension rising between them. "I don't want to be here any more than you do. But there's something you need to know." She looked up at him, her eyes full of hurt, exhaustion, and suspicion. "What? What could you possibly have to say to me after all these years?" Lucas hesitated. How could he even begin to explain Helena's plan without sounding insane? How could he tell Mia that she had been dragged into a power struggle she had nothing to do with? "There's no easy way to say this," Lucas started, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Helena, my stepmother. She's forcing me to marry you." The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. Mia stared at him, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. "What?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lucas nodded, hating every second of this. "It's true. She's using this as a way to humiliate me, to ruin my reputation and take control of the family business. And you're part of that plan." For a long moment, Mia didn't speak. Her eyes searched his, trying to find some hidden motive, some clue that this was all some kind of sick joke. But there was nothing, just the raw, undeniable truth. "So what?" Mia finally said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You came here to save yourself? To drag me into your family's mess?" "No," Lucas shook his head, stepping even closer now, desperate for her to understand. "I didn't want this, Mia. I didn't even know it was you until just now. But if I don't do this, Helena will destroy everything, and I don't think she'll stop at me. Mia stood up slowly, her body tense, her hands trembling as she wrapped her coat tighter around herself. So I'm supposed to what? Marry you? Play along with your stepmother's twisted game? I don't know what to do, Lucas admitted, his voice breaking. But I don't want to hurt you, Mia. I didn't ask for this. The silence between them stretched, heavy and suffocating. Lucas watched as Mia processed everything, her mind racing with thoughts he couldn't even begin to understand. This wasn't just about him or his family anymore. This was about a past they both shared, a past that had been ripped apart, leaving scars neither of them had fully healed from. I can't believe this, Mia whispered, her eyes filling with tears she refused to let fall. I can't believe you're here, asking me to do this. Lucas wanted to reach out to her, to apologize for everything, even though he knew it wouldn't be enough. But he stayed rooted in place, knowing that nothing he could say would make this right. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I wish there was another way. Mia wiped her eyes quickly, regaining her composure. I don't know what you expect from me, Lucas, but if you think I'm going to just go along with this, you're wrong. I don't expect anything, he said. I just need you to hear me out. She stared at him for a long moment, then finally nodded. Fine, but this doesn't mean I'm agreeing to anything. Not yet. Lucas exhaled, relief and tension mixing in his chest. He had no idea how they would move forward from here, but at least she was willing to listen. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and tension for Lucas. Every passing moment felt like a ticking clock, counting down to the disaster Helena was orchestrating. He and Mia had met a few more times since that first encounter, each conversation more uncomfortable than the last. Neither of them wanted to be caught in this twisted game, yet neither could see a way out. Helena, meanwhile, seemed to revel in the chaos she had created. She wasted no time spreading the word to the family's influential circle, making sure everyone knew that Lucas was set to marry a woman from the streets. It wasn't enough to trap him in a loveless marriage. She wanted to humiliate him, to ensure that his once sterling reputation was reduced to nothing but whispers of pity and scandal. It all came to a head at a lavish dinner party, the kind Helena loved to throw. The guest list was handpicked: politicians, wealthy business partners, and of course, the elite socialites who thrived on gossip. Lucas could feel the pressure mounting as he arrived, knowing that tonight was the night Helena would unveil her cruel masterpiece. He entered the ballroom, feeling out of place in the tailored suit Helena had insisted he wear. The room was adorned with extravagant chandeliers and shimmering decor, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling inside him. Conversations buzzed around him as he greeted a few familiar faces, all of whom seemed blissfully unaware of the storm about to hit. Helena stood at the center of the room, effortlessly commanding attention in a floor-length gown, her smile as sharp as ever. Lucas could feel her eyes on him the moment he walked in, watching his every move like a predator sizing up its prey. She was in control tonight, and she knew it. Lucas, Helena's voice cut through the crowd as she approached him, her tone saccharine sweet. I'm so glad you could make it. Tonight is a very special night for you. After all, he forced a smile, though his insides churned with resentment. Helena, he replied, keeping his voice calm. Let's not make a scene. Oh, darling, I wouldn't dream of it, she cooed, leaning in as if they were sharing some private joke. But everyone's been dying to meet your lovely bride-to-be. I do hope she'll make a good impression. Lucas swallowed hard, his gaze shifting nervously around the room. His stomach twisted at the thought of Mia being paraded around like a spectacle, all for Helena's amusement. He had warned Mia what to expect, but he wasn't sure if either of them were truly prepared for what was coming. The room quieted as Helena clinked her glass, signaling for attention. She raised her voice, a perfect performance of charm and elegance. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight. As you know, our family has always prided itself on tradition, on integrity, and most of all on love. Lucas barely resisted the urge to roll his eyes. This was all part of the charade, Helena playing the role of the gracious matriarch, when in reality, she was the architect of his downfall. And so, Helena continued, her eyes gleaming as she glanced toward Lucas. "I'm thrilled to announce that my dear stepson, Lucas, has found the love of his life. A true love story, in fact. One that transcends the ordinary and touches the very essence of human connection." Lucas's jaw clenched. He knew what was coming next. "And now, without further ado, allow me to introduce you to Mia, the future Mrs. Lucas Martins," Helena declared, her voice dripping with mock sincerity. A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned toward the entrance. Mia stepped in, her posture stiff but dignified. She wore a simple dress, something Helena had provided for her last minute, yet it did nothing to disguise the stark contrast between her and the polished world she was walking into. Lucas could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she scanned the room with cautious eyes, ready for the onslaught of judgment she was about to face. Helena glided over to Mia, taking her arm in a possessive grip, as if she were presenting a trophy to the crowd. "Isn't she lovely?" Helena said, her voice sweet but her words laced with venom. A true diamond in the rough. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest. He could see the whispers beginning, the murmurs of disbelief as the guests took in Mia's appearance. A homeless woman. That's what they would see. That's all they would care about. But Mia stood her ground, her eyes locking with Lucas's from across the room. For a moment, everything else faded. It was just the two of them, trapped in this nightmare together. Helena, satisfied with the spectacle she had created, continued her speech. "You see, love comes in all forms, doesn't it? And sometimes, the most unexpected love stories are the ones that capture our hearts the most. Lucas, darling, why don't you tell everyone how you met Mia?" Lucas's blood ran cold. Helena had gone too far. She wasn't just humiliating him. She was making a mockery of Mia, using her as a prop in her twisted game. Mia's eyes flashed with anger, but before Lucas could step in, she spoke up. "I'm sure Lucas would love to tell you," Mia said, her voice steady, though it quivered with underlying emotion. "But the truth is, our meeting wasn't some fairy tale." The room fell silent, all eyes on her. "We didn't meet under perfect circumstances," Mia continued, her gaze never leaving Helena's. "I was homeless. I am homeless. And this isn't some romantic story where the rich man saves the poor woman. It's not about love." Lucas's heart pounded as he watched her. This was not the script Helena had planned. Mia took a deep breath, her voice firm now. "This is about survival. For both of us." The crowd murmured, unsure of what to make of her words. But Lucas understood. Mia was telling the truth, the raw, unvarnished truth that Helena had tried so hard to bury beneath her manipulations. Helena's smile faltered for the first time that night, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. Lucas saw it, and for the first time, he felt a surge of something close to hope. Mia wasn't going to let Helena win so easily. He stepped forward, standing beside Mia. "She's right," Lucas said, his voice clear and unwavering. "This isn't some fairy tale. But that doesn't mean it isn't real. We've both been put in a position neither of us wanted. But we're not going to let anyone, not even you, Helena, dictate how this ends." Helena's eyes flashed with fury, but she quickly masked it with a forced laugh. "Oh, Lucas, always so dramatic." Lucas smiled tightly. "I learned from the best." For a brief moment, it felt like he and Mia had taken control, like they had shifted the narrative. The guests weren't sure what to believe anymore. And that was all they needed, just enough doubt to weaken Helena's grip on the situation. The night wasn't over, but Lucas knew that something had changed. He and Mia were no longer just victims in Helena's cruel plan. They were partners, whether they liked it or not. And for the first time, Lucas began to see a path forward, one where Helena didn't hold all the power. The night of the dinner party left a heavy silence between Lucas and Mia. After the spectacle Helena had orchestrated, they left together in Lucas's car, both too drained to talk. The city lights blurred as they drove through the empty streets, the weight of everything hanging in the air between them. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they had only just begun to fight back, but there was still so much he didn't know. They pulled up to Lucas's apartment, a spacious penthouse in a part of town that seemed worlds away from where Mia had been living. The contrast wasn't lost on either of them. Lucas offered her a place to stay for the night. knowing that asking her to go back to the streets after everything she had endured was out of the question. "I'll sleep on the couch," he said as they entered, his voice stiff. He hadn't quite figured out how to talk to her yet, how to navigate the mess their lives had become. Mia didn't argue. She sat down in one of the chairs by the large windows, staring out at the skyline. The silence between them was thick, filled with unsaid words, but Lucas could sense that Mia was on the edge of revealing something. She had stood up to Helena tonight, showed a side of herself that Lucas had only glimpsed before. There was a fire in her, a resilience that he admired. But he also knew that fire came from a place of deep pain. After what felt like an eternity, Mia finally spoke, her voice quiet, almost distant. "You don't remember, do you?" Lucas turned to face her, confused. "Remember what?" She let out a bitter laugh, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her sleeves. "Me, from before I disappeared." The words hung in the air like a weight, heavy and ominous. Lucas's mind raced. He had recognized her face, sure, but he hadn't allowed himself to delve into the past. Not really. Not until now. "I remember. We were kids, right?" Lucas said cautiously. "We used to play together when my father took me to that old summer house outside the city." Mia nodded, but her eyes were distant, as if she was looking at a time long ago. "It was more than that, Lucas. We weren't just kids playing in the yard. We were friends. Best friends. Until everything changed." Lucas felt a pang of guilt. His memories of that time were blurred, fragmented. He remembered the summer house, remembered running through the fields with a girl by his side. But those memories had always seemed more like a dream than reality. His life had become so consumed by the demands of his father, the expectations of the family business, that he had pushed the past aside. "What happened?" he asked softly. "Why did you leave?" Mia's expression hardened. She took a deep breath, as if bracing herself for what she was about to say. "Your family happened, Lucas." His heart sank. He had been prepared for something painful, but not this. "What do you mean?" Mia turned to face him, her eyes dark with emotions she had kept hidden for far too long. "Your father. He wasn't the man you thought he was. Not to me, anyway. After my parents died, your father offered to help my grandmother take care of me. At first, it seemed like a blessing. We had nothing. No money, no way to survive. But it wasn't long before the real price of his help became clear." Lucas's stomach twisted. "What are you saying?" Mia's voice cracked, but she forced herself to continue. He wanted something in return. My grandmother realized too late that the only reason he was helping us was because he thought he could control us. And when she tried to stand up to him, he made sure we lost everything. He cut us off, just like that. No money, no support. We were thrown out of the house, left to fend for ourselves. She couldn't handle it, Lucas. She got sick, and then she died." Lucas stared at her, the world spinning around him. His father? The man he had looked up to, admired, was capable of something like that? His mind raced, trying to reconcile the image he had of his father with the man Mia was describing. "I never knew," he whispered, his voice hollow. "I had no idea." Mia's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Of course you didn't. You were a kid. You were shielded from all of it. But I wasn't. I lived through it. And after my grandmother died, I was on my own. I had nowhere to go. That's when I disappeared, Lucas. That's when I ended up on the streets." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, guilt and disbelief swirling inside him. How could this have happened without him knowing? How had his family caused so much pain without him even realizing it? "Mia, I'm so sorry. I can't even begin to understand what you went through." Mia shrugged, though her eyes were glassy with unshed tears. "It doesn't matter now, does it? What's done is done. I survived, somehow. But when Helena dragged me into this mess, it all came flooding back. I thought I could stay away from your world, but I guess I was wrong." Lucas stood up, pacing across the room. His mind was reeling. This wasn't just about Helena's cruel game anymore. This went deeper, much deeper. His family had hurt Mia in ways he couldn't have imagined, and now he was being forced to face the ugly truth. "I don't know what to say," Lucas admitted, his voice raw. but I want to fix this. I don't know how yet, but I need to make things right." Mia shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You can't fix the past, Lucas, and I don't need saving." "I'm not trying to save you," Lucas said quickly, his voice firm. I need you to know that I'm not like my father. I don't want to hurt you." For a long moment, Mia was silent, studying him, as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she sighed, rubbing her hands over her face in exhaustion. "I believe you, but that doesn't change the fact that we're stuck in this mess together now." Lucas sat down across from her, the weight of her words pressing down on him. She was right. They were both trapped by Helena, by his family's legacy, by the ghosts of the past. But maybe, just maybe, there was a way out. "We'll figure this out," Lucas said quietly. "I promise." Mia gave him a small, tired smile, but there was no hope in it. "I've learned not to rely on promises, Lucas." The room fell into silence once more, the truth of Mia's past hanging between them like a shadow. Lucas knew that things would never be the same between them, not after everything that had been revealed. But he also knew that he couldn't let Helena win. Not this time. For the first time in a long while, Lucas felt a sense of purpose. He had to protect Mia, not just from Helena's schemes, but from the damage his family had already caused. And he would, no matter what it took. Lucas barely slept after Mia's revelations. Her words haunted him, gnawing at his conscience, reshaping the image of his father into something dark and twisted. It wasn't just the shame of not knowing. It was the guilt of having lived a life of privilege while Mia had been left to fend for herself, discarded by the very family that had promised to protect her. But as the sun rose over the city the next morning, Lucas knew one thing for certain. Helena was hiding more than just her plan to humiliate him. There was a deeper rot in the family, and it started with his father. Determined to find answers, Lucas began searching through his father's old files. He spent hours poring over financial records, business deals, and personal correspondence, looking for any hint of what Mia had told him. Helena had been in control of everything after his father's death, and Lucas hadn't questioned it. But now, every decision she'd made, every paper she had signed, felt suspicious. Mia watched him from across the room, her arms crossed as she leaned against the wall. She hadn't said much since their conversation the night before, but Lucas could feel her eyes on him, waiting, perhaps unsure if she could trust him with the truth. "Anything yet?" she asked after what felt like hours of silence. Lucas shook his head, frustrated. "There's too much here. Too many deals, too many names. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack." He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. His father's empire was vast, and Helena had her hands in every part of it. Lucas knew he was missing something, but he didn't know where to start. Mia hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "There was something your father used to talk about," she said quietly, her voice hesitant. "Something that he didn't want people to know. I overheard him once, talking to someone on the phone. He mentioned a fund, something offshore. I don't remember all the details, but it sounded important." Lucas's eyes widened. A fund? That could explain why Helena had so much control. If his father had hidden money, maybe Helena had used it to manipulate the family business, to take control after his death. He quickly turned back to the files, rifling through them with renewed urgency. Offshore accounts, hidden investments. "There has to be something here," Lucas muttered under his breath, flipping through the pages. Mia crossed the room, standing beside him now. "Do you think Helena knows about it?" "I'm sure she does," Lucas said, his voice hardening. "If my father was hiding something, Helena would have been the first to find out. She probably used it to get a stranglehold on everything after he died." They worked in silence, combing through more files, until finally, Lucas found something that made his heart skip a beat. "Here," he said, pointing to a small, innocuous-looking document buried among the legal papers. "It's a transfer to a private account in the Cayman Islands. Look at the amount. This is way more than I've ever seen in our family's records." Mia leaned over his shoulder, her eyes narrowing as she read the numbers. "That's millions, Lucas. And it's not accounted for anywhere else?" "No," Lucas replied, his pulse quickening. "This was hidden. My father must have created it before his death, and Helena has been using it to fund her schemes. She's been siphoning money out of the family business. Mia straightened up, her expression grim. So that's how she's been keeping everyone under control. She's been buying them off, using this money to stay in power. Lucas clenched his fists. It explains everything. All the people who should have been loyal to the family, they've been paid off. And anyone who got in her way was probably ruined. But something didn't add up. If Helena had access to that much money, why would she need to ruin Lucas with the fake marriage to Mia? She already had control of the family's fortune. There had to be more. I think there's something else, Lucas said slowly, piecing the puzzle together. Helena's plan to humiliate me, publicly, it's not just about the money. It's about power. She wants to make sure no one ever questions her authority again. If she destroys me, I won't be a threat to her. No one will be. Mia nodded, her face grim. She's building her own empire, Lucas. And you're the last obstacle. The weight of the situation settled over him like a crushing burden. Lucas had never been a fighter, never had to be. But now, with the truth unfolding in front of him, he knew he had no choice. Helena had gone too far, and he couldn't let her win. Not after what she had done to Mia, to his family. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Lucas and Mia exchanged a glance, tension thickening the air. They weren't expecting anyone. Cautiously, Lucas moved to the door, peering through the peephole. His blood ran cold when he saw who it was. A man in a sharp suit stood on the other side, his expression unreadable, but Lucas recognized him immediately. It was Edward Lawton, one of Helena's closest allies and a powerful businessman with deep ties to the family. Lucas opened the door just enough to speak, his heart pounding in his chest. "What are you doing here, Edward?" Edward didn't smile. He stepped forward, his presence imposing. "We need to talk, Lucas. Now." Lucas glanced back at Mia, who stood frozen, her eyes wide with fear. Whatever was happening, it wasn't good. "I'm busy," Lucas said, trying to sound calm. "Maybe we can talk later." Edward's expression didn't change. "This isn't something you can put off. I have information about your father, about Helena, and it's time you know the truth." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. The truth? He had thought he was already uncovering the truth. But the look in Edward's eyes told him there was more, much more. He opened the door fully, motioning for Edward to come inside. As he stepped in, Lucas felt the atmosphere shift, a new tension filling the room. Mia moved to stand by Lucas's side, her face pale but determined. Edward's gaze flickered to Mia for a moment before settling back on Lucas. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Edward said quietly. "Helena's been pulling the strings, yes, but she's not the one you should be worried about." Lucas frowned, his mind racing. "What are you talking about?" Edward let out a sigh, his face betraying a rare flicker of emotion. "There's someone else behind all of this. Someone far more dangerous than Helena. And if you don't act quickly, everything you've worked for, everything your father built, will be gone." The room went silent, the weight of Edward's words hanging in the air like a storm cloud. Lucas exchanged a glance with Mia, fear and uncertainty flashing between them. Lucas's voice was low when he finally spoke. "Who is it?" Edward's eyes darkened, and for the first time, Lucas saw a hint of real fear in the man's expression. "You're not ready to know, but I'll tell you this, Helena isn't your biggest enemy. She's just a pawn in a much bigger game." As the reality of Edward's words sank in, Lucas felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He had thought he was fighting Helena, but now it was clear. There was someone else pulling the strings. And whoever they were about to turn Lucas's world upside down. Enjoying the video? Subscribe to our channel to receive more interesting content. Click the subscribe button and stay updated with the latest news. The revelation Edward dropped on Lucas hung over him like a suffocating weight. Helena wasn't the mastermind. She was just another pawn. But if that was true, then the threat they were facing was bigger, more dangerous than Lucas had ever imagined. Mia and Lucas barely had time to process the news before a new urgency gripped them both. They needed to act now. If someone else was pulling the strings, they had to expose Helena's role before this unseen enemy made their next move. Lucas made up his mind. They couldn't wait in the shadows anymore, gathering bits of information like they were trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle in the dark. It was time to confront Helena, directly, publicly, and they needed to do it before she found a way to silence them both. The next day, Lucas arrived at the family estate, the sprawling mansion that had once felt like a fortress of privilege but now seemed more like a prison. His steps were heavy as he crossed the marble floor, his heart pounding in his chest. Helena was waiting for him in the drawing room, where she liked to hold court over the affairs of the family business. He knew this confrontation would be dangerous. Helena was a master manipulator, and she wouldn't go down easily. But Lucas wasn't the same man he had been weeks ago, naive and obedient to the whims of the family. Now, he was ready to fight. Helena looked up from her seat when Lucas entered the room, her eyes narrowing. "Lucas," she greeted, her tone icy but poised. "What brings you here? Have you finally come to your senses?" Lucas felt a surge of anger rise in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "We need to talk, Helena. Now." She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into that familiar, condescending smile. "Oh? About what, exactly? Your charming fiancé? Or perhaps you're here to beg for mercy?" Lucas clenched his fists at his sides, his patience wearing thin. "Enough with the games. I know what you've been doing." Helena's smile faltered just for a moment, but she quickly regained her composure. "I'm not sure I understand. What exactly is it that you think you know?" Lucas took a step forward, his voice sharp. "The offshore accounts. The money you've been siphoning from the family business. The lies you've told to keep everyone under your control. It's all coming out now, Helena. I'm not the same blind fool you've been manipulating for years." Helena's expression hardened, and for the first time, Lucas saw the mask of civility drop. There was no more pretense of warmth, no false smiles. She stood up from her chair, her eyes flashing with cold fury. "And what are you going to do with this so-called knowledge, Lucas?" Helena asked, her voice dripping with venom. "Run to the authorities? Publicly humiliate me? You think you can take me down with a few scraps of information? You have no idea how deep this goes." Lucas met her gaze, his own resolve hardening. "I know enough to destroy you. I know about the offshore funds, the bribes, the way you've used the family name to line your own pockets. And I'm not the only one who knows. Mia knows. Edward knows. This is over, Helena." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The tension in the room was suffocating, the air thick with the weight of their unspoken history. But then Helena let out a low, bitter laugh, shaking her head as if she found the entire situation amusing. "You still don't get it, do you?" she said, stepping closer to him. "This isn't about money, Lucas. It never was. Do you think exposing me will solve anything? Do you think your little rebellion will bring your father back, restore your family's honor?" She leaned in, her voice a dangerous whisper. "You are nothing without me. I've kept this family afloat. I've kept you afloat." Lucas's heart raced, but he refused to back down. "You've done nothing but tear this family apart. You've destroyed lives, Helena. And now, it's time for you to face the consequences." Helena's eyes darkened, her voice lowering to a near growl. "You have no idea what you're up against. You think you're the hero in this story, Lucas? You think you can win? There are forces at play here that you can't even begin to understand." Lucas's pulse quickened, remembering Edward's cryptic warning. "Who is it, Helena? Who's really pulling the strings?" For a brief second, something flickered in Helena's eyes, fear. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. She straightened her posture, her face once again a mask of control. "You're in over your head, Lucas," she said coldly. "You've always been in over your head. And now, you've dragged that little street rat of yours into this mess. You think you can protect her? You think you can save her from what's coming?" Lucas stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with defiance. "I'm not going to let you hurt her. Not anymore." Helena's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "Oh, Lucas, it's too late for that." Before Lucas could respond, the door to the drawing room swung open and Mia entered, her expression hard and unyielding. She had heard enough. "Stop hiding behind your threats, Helena," Mia said, her voice strong. "You're losing control, and you know it." Helena's eyes narrowed as she turned to face Mia. Ah, the prodigal fiancé returns. Still playing the role of the wounded victim, I see. Mia didn't flinch. She stepped forward, standing beside Lucas, her chin held high. I'm not a victim. Not anymore. I know what you did to my family, Helena, and I know what you've done to Lucas. You've built your empire on lies, and now it's crumbling around you. Helena's face twisted in fury, but Mia pressed on, her voice unwavering. You thought you could control us. You thought you could use us. But we're not your pawns anymore. Lucas felt a surge of pride as he watched Mia stand her ground, her strength and courage radiating through the room. Together, they were no longer just victims of Helena's cruelty. They were a united front, ready to fight back. You're finished, Helena, Lucas said, his voice steady. It's over. For a moment, Helena simply stared at them, her eyes calculating, searching for a way out. But the silence stretched on, and it became clear that her power, her control, was slipping away. She had lost. Helena let out a slow breath, her face pale but defiant. You think this is the end? You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. With that, she turned and stormed out of the room, leaving Lucas and Mia standing alone in the aftermath of the confrontation. The tension in the air was thick, but Lucas felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. They had done it. They had faced Helena head-on, and for the first time, she hadn't been able to manipulate her way out. But her final words echoed in his mind, a chilling reminder that their fight wasn't over. There was still someone else out there, someone more dangerous, more powerful than Helena, and whoever it was, they were still pulling the strings. Lucas turned to Mia, his voice soft but determined. We'll find out who it is. We'll bring them down. Mia nodded, her expression firm but exhausted. We will. But we need to be ready for whatever's next. Together, they stood in the silence of the drawing room, knowing that the real battle was still ahead of them. But now, they were ready to face it, together. The tension from the confrontation with Helena still hung heavy in the air as Lucas and Mia left the family estate. There was no sense of victory, just the feeling of a storm building on the horizon. Helena might have been cornered, but her cryptic warning still echoed in their minds. There's someone else? Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that they had barely scratched the surface of the darkness surrounding his family. His thoughts raced as they drove through the quiet streets. Beside him, Mia stared out the window, her expression unreadable, but Lucas knew her well enough now to recognize the exhaustion beneath her calm exterior. She's not done with us, Mia said finally, her voice quiet but steady. Even if Helena's losing her grip, she's not going to go down without a fight. And if she's not the one in control, her voice trailed off, leaving the terrifying thought hanging between them. Lucas gripped the steering wheel tighter. Whoever's behind this, we'll find them. We'll stop them. He spoke with more confidence than he felt, but he couldn't afford to show doubt. Not now. Not when they were so close to unraveling the truth. Mia nodded, but the worry in her eyes was unmistakable. I don't think we're ready for what's coming, Lucas. As they pulled up outside Lucas's apartment, he parked the car and turned to her, his jaw set with determination. We'll get ready. We've come this far. We can't back down now. But as they stepped into the apartment, there was a surprise waiting for them. Edward Lawton, Helena's powerful ally, was already there, seated in one of the armchairs, a glass of whiskey in hand as if he had been expecting them all along. Lucas, Mia, he greeted coolly, his sharp gaze flicking between them. I thought we should have a little chat. Lucas's instincts went on high alert. Edward had been involved with Helena for years, a key player in her rise to power. He was the last person Lucas expected to see sitting in his living room, especially after the bombshell he had dropped during their last meeting. What are you doing here, Edward? Lucas asked, keeping his voice calm but firm. He didn't trust the man, not after everything he had been involved in. Edward took a slow sip of his drink before answering. I'm here because you're in over your head. Both of you. He set the glass down and leaned forward, his expression serious. Helena may be on the ropes, but she's not the real threat. You're dealing with something much bigger than her. And if you want any chance of surviving this, you'll need me. Lucas felt a surge of anger rising in his chest. Surviving? You think we're just going to roll over, and let whoever's behind this destroy everything? Edward's eyes flashed with something close to impatience. No, I don't. But if you don't understand what you're up against, you'll lose everything. Helena's ruthless, yes, but she's small time compared to the people truly pulling the strings. You need an ally who knows how to navigate this world. And that's where I come in. Mia crossed her arms, her voice laced with suspicion. Why should we trust you? You've been in Helena's pocket for years. Edward's gaze shifted to Mia, his expression softening slightly. Because I know where the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. And because I have no interest in seeing Helena's empire fall into the hands of someone even more dangerous. Lucas wasn't convinced. You're still not telling us everything, Edward. Who's behind all this? Who's controlling Helena? Edward stood, pacing the room like a man carrying the weight of secrets too dark to speak aloud. It's not just one person. It's a network, a consortium of powerful figures, each with their own agenda. Helena's just one cog in a much larger machine. They've been using her to manipulate your family for years, Lucas, ever since your father's death. And now, they're preparing to make their final move. Lucas's pulse quickened. What move? Edward turned, his expression grim. A hostile takeover. The company, the estate, the entire family fortune. It's all in play. Helena's been playing both sides, trying to secure her place in the new regime. But if you don't act fast, it won't be hers, and it certainly won't be yours. It'll belong to them. Mia stepped forward, her voice sharp with anger. Why should we believe you now? You've been part of this from the beginning. How do we know you're not just trying to save yourself? Edward's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Lucas saw something close to regret flicker in the man's gaze. You're right. I've done things, terrible things, to protect my interests. But what's coming next? It's beyond anything I ever agreed to. If this consortium takes control, they won't just ruin the Martins family. They'll destroy anyone in their path, including me. Lucas exchanged a glance with Mia, his mind racing. Could they trust Edward? He had been complicit in Helena's schemes for years, but there was something different in his demeanor now, something desperate. And what exactly are you proposing? Lucas asked, keeping his voice measured. Edward took a deep breath, as if weighing his words carefully. I can give you the names, the key players, the people Helena's been working for. But you'll need to move fast, and you'll need allies, powerful ones. People who can stand up to the consortium when the time comes. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment they had been waiting for, the chance to finally strike back against the people who had been controlling his family from the shadows. But it was a gamble. Edward was playing both sides, and there was no guarantee he wouldn't turn on them the moment it suited him. Mia stepped closer to Lucas, her voice low but firm. What do you think? Can we trust him? Lucas hesitated, his mind racing. I don't know, he admitted, but we don't have many options. If what he's saying is true, we're running out of time. Edward watched them in silence, waiting for their decision. The room felt charged with tension, the weight of their next move hanging over them like a sword ready to drop. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice steady. We'll hear what you have to say. But if you're lying to us, Edward, if this is just another one of your games, you'll regret it. Edward nodded, his face unreadable. Fair enough. But if I were you, I'd start preparing for war. The words hung in the air like a prophecy, and Lucas felt the enormity of the situation crash down on him. This wasn't just about exposing Helena anymore. This was about survival, about protecting the people he cared about from forces far beyond anything he had ever imagined. Mia's hand brushed against his, and for a brief moment, the chaos swirling around them faded. They were in this together, and no matter what came next, they would face it side by side. Edward turned toward the door, his voice echoing through the room. I'll be in touch soon. You'll need to act quickly if you want any chance of winning this. As the door closed behind him, Lucas exhaled, his mind still spinning. He had no idea who these shadowy figures were or what their ultimate goal might be, but one thing was certain. They were running out of time. We need to prepare, Mia said, her voice steady but resolute. He's right about that. If we're going to fight this, we need allies. We need a plan. Lucas nodded, his heart pounding with adrenaline. "We will, and we'll fight with everything we've got." But as they stood together in the quiet of the apartment, Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle had only just begun. They had pulled back the curtain on Helena's cruelty, but the forces behind her were still lurking in the shadows, waiting for their moment to strike. And when that moment came, Lucas knew it would take everything they had to survive. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom as he and Mia prepared for the fight ahead. Edward's warning echoed in his mind, reminding him that they were up against more than just Helena. The consortium, powerful, hidden figures pulling the strings, loomed over everything like a dark cloud. And now, with Edward's offer of information, they had one chance to expose the truth before it swallowed them whole. But first, they had to uncover the final piece of the puzzle, the secret that had torn his family apart. The clues were there, scattered across his father's past, hidden in the cracks of the family business, in the whispered conversations between Helena and her allies. Lucas had a sinking feeling that the truth, whatever it was, would change everything. Edward had given them names, key figures who had worked alongside Helena in the shadows, each of them playing a role in manipulating the family's fortune. But the real answer lay deeper, buried in the past. Something connected to his father's death and the consortium's rise to power. Lucas and Mia spent days digging through old records, tracing every thread of evidence they could find. Financial documents, personal letters, even old photographs. All of it led back to one event: his father's sudden, unexpected death. Lucas had always believed his father had died of natural causes. That's what he had been told, and he had never questioned it. But now, with everything he had learned, doubt crept in like a shadow. Mia, who had been by his side through every twist and turn, finally spoke up as they sifted through the last of the documents. "Lucas, do you think your father's death was part of this?" Lucas froze, the thought hitting him like a punch to the gut. "You mean that he was killed?" Mia nodded, her eyes full of concern. "It makes sense. If Helena and the consortium were trying to take over the family business, your father would have been in their way. Maybe they had him removed." The possibility sent a chill down Lucas's spine. His father, his larger-than-life, untouchable father, murdered? It was unthinkable. But the more he considered it, the more it seemed to fit. Helena's rise to power had been almost immediate after his father's death. She had taken control of everything, seamlessly stepping into a position that, under normal circumstances, she would have never held. Suddenly, something clicked in Lucas's mind. "Wait," he said, grabbing one of the older files. "There's something missing here. A contract. I remember my father talking about it years ago. Something that could protect the family business in case anything happened to him." He rifled through the papers, searching for any mention of it. Finally, he found it, a reference to a binding agreement, something that would have kept the company from falling into the wrong hands. But the contract had never been enacted. It had vanished after his father's death. "Here it is," Lucas muttered, pointing to the file. "This contract, it should have protected us. But it disappeared right after my father died." Mia leaned over, reading the document. "And Helena's been in control ever since," she said, her voice thick with understanding. "Lucas, this is it. This is how they did it. They must have gotten rid of the contract and made sure your father wasn't around to enforce it." Lucas's mind raced. If they could find proof that his father had been killed, it would blow everything wide open. Helena, the consortium, they would all be exposed. But finding that proof would be dangerous. The people behind this conspiracy had already shown they were willing to kill to protect their secrets. "Where do we start?" Mia asked, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. Lucas stared at the file in his hands, knowing that the answer lay with the man they had both come to fear, the one who had orchestrated everything behind the scenes, Helena's most powerful ally within the consortium. His name had appeared in several documents, always connected to shady dealings, always in the background. Victor Marlowe, a man so powerful, so feared, that even the whispers of his name sent shivers down the spines of those in the know. Victor had been a longtime business partner of Lucas's father, but after his death, Victor's influence over the family empire had grown in ways Lucas never understood, until now. "Victor Marlowe," Lucas said, his voice tight. He's the one. He was behind all of this. Mia's eyes widened. You think he? Lucas nodded. He was close to my father, too close. And after my father died, Victor was there, working with Helena, gaining more control. He must have been involved. If anyone knows the truth, it's him. But confronting Victor Marlowe wasn't going to be easy. The man was untouchable, insulated by layers of wealth and power. If they went after him, they would need solid proof, something undeniable that could bring down both Victor and the consortium in one blow. Mia's voice broke through his thoughts. So, what do we do? How do we get to him? Lucas thought for a moment, his mind working through the possibilities. We need to find the original contract, he said slowly. If we can find it, we'll have leverage. Victor and Helena thought they buried it, but if we can prove it still exists, we can force their hand. Mia frowned. But where would it be? If they've hidden it for this long? Lucas's eyes lit up with realization. My father's old lawyer. He was one of the few people my father trusted completely. If anyone has the contract, it's him. They wasted no time. The lawyer's office was a modest one, tucked away in the outskirts of the city. As they approached, Lucas's heart pounded with a mix of hope and fear. This was it, their last chance to uncover the truth. The lawyer, an older man named Henry Kincaid, greeted them with a wary look when they arrived. He had served Lucas's father for years, but after his death, Kincaid had been pushed to the margins by Helena's influence. Still, Lucas hoped the man's loyalty to his father remained intact. I didn't expect to see you here, Lucas, Kincaid said as they sat down. What can I do for you? Lucas took a deep breath. I need to know if my father left anything with you. A contract, something that would have protected the company after his death. Kincaid's eyes darkened with understanding, and he leaned back in his chair. I was wondering when you'd come asking about that. Lucas's heart raced. So, it exists? Kincaid nodded slowly. Yes, it exists. But after your father died, I was told to destroy it. I didn't, but I was forced to hide it. For my own safety. You understand, Victor Marlowe has eyes everywhere. Mia and Lucas exchanged a glance, the weight of Kincaid's words sinking in. They were so close now. Where is it? Lucas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kincaid hesitated for a moment, then stood and walked to a safe hidden behind a painting on the wall. He opened it carefully, revealing a single document, yellowed with age but still intact. This is what you're looking for, Kincaid said, handing it to Lucas. But be careful. Once you have this, you'll be painting a target on your back. Victor won't let you walk away with it easily. Lucas nodded, gripping the contract tightly. He knew Kincaid was right. This was the proof they needed, but it also put them in more danger than ever before. As they left the office, Lucas felt the weight of the contract in his hands. It was the key to everything, the evidence that could bring Victor and Helena down. But it also meant they were stepping into the heart of the storm. We have what we need, Mia said softly as they walked back to the car. Now we just need to make sure the world knows the truth. Lucas nodded, determination hardening in his chest. We will. But first, we need to be ready for what's coming next. Because they both knew that the moment they revealed the truth, Victor Marlowe would come for them. And this time, he wouldn't hold back. Lucas stood at the edge of the storm, the weight of his father's contract in his hand and the enormity of what he and Mia were about to do crashing down on him. The world around them felt like it was closing in. Victor Marlowe's reach was long, and they both knew that going public with this contract would paint a target on their backs. But the time for fear was over. They had the proof, and they had the determination to finally bring down Helena, Victor, and the entire corrupt consortium that had been pulling the strings for years. Mia, standing beside him, her gaze focused and unwavering, placed her hand on his. Are you ready for this? She asked quietly. Lucas nodded. We don't have a choice. Together, they stepped into the lion's den, a press conference arranged by Lucas's contacts in the media, one of the few parts of the family's empire that Victor and Helena hadn't corrupted. The room was filled with reporters, cameras, and curious onlookers who had caught wind of the upcoming revelations. This would be their battleground. As Lucas took the podium, the eyes of the world seemed to be upon him. He held the contract up for everyone to see. This, he began, his voice steady but loud enough to carry across the room, "is the document that my father left behind. A contract that was meant to protect our family business after his death, but it was hidden, buried, by the very people who now control everything." He glanced at Mia, who stood beside him as his unwavering ally, before continuing. "Helena, my stepmother, has manipulated this family for years. But it goes deeper than that. She was working with Victor Marlowe and others like him to take over not just the Martins family business, but to control everything my father built." The room fell silent as Lucas dropped the bombshell. "My father didn't die of natural causes. He was killed, and we believe Victor Marlowe was behind it." The reporters exploded into chaos, cameras flashing as questions flew from every corner of the room. But Lucas wasn't finished. He held up his hand to calm the crowd, his voice cutting through the noise. "I know these are serious accusations," Lucas said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "But we have proof. And today, we're making that proof public." Mia stepped forward, holding a stack of documents, evidence they had painstakingly gathered over the last few days. Financial records, hidden transactions, bribes. Everything that connected Helena and Victor to the conspiracy that had destroyed his family. As the documents were distributed to the media, Lucas felt the weight of years of manipulation and deceit finally begin to lift. This was the moment they had fought for. The moment to expose the truth and bring justice not just for themselves, but for everyone who had suffered at the hands of Helena and her allies. But just as the room buzzed with shock and disbelief, a sudden commotion broke out at the back. The crowd parted as Helena herself stormed into the room, her face twisted in fury. Victor Marlowe was with her, his cold, calculating eyes scanning the room, already assessing the damage. "You think this is over?" Helena's voice rang out, venom dripping from every word. She marched to the front of the room, her gaze locked on Lucas. "You think you can destroy me with a few pieces of paper? You're a fool, Lucas." Lucas stood his ground, his heart pounding in his chest. "It's over, Helena. Everyone knows the truth now." Helena's eyes flashed with rage, but Victor Marlowe remained eerily calm as he approached. "You've made a dangerous mistake, Lucas," Victor said, his voice low but filled with menace. "You think the media will save you? You think the world will care about your little sob story?" Lucas swallowed hard, knowing the power Victor wielded. But before he could respond, Mia stepped forward, her voice clear and cutting through the tension. "You won't get away with this, Victor. Not anymore. The truth is out, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Victor's lips curled into a cold smile. "We'll see about that." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed through the room, and a group of men in dark suits entered, carrying a weight of authority that made the crowd go silent. But these weren't Victor's men. They were law enforcement, and they were here for Helena and Victor. One of the officers, the lead investigator who had been quietly watching the proceedings, stepped forward, holding up a warrant. "Helena Martins, Victor Marlowe, you're both under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and the suspected murder of Robert Martins." The shock on Helena's face was palpable as she realized the walls were closing in. Victor, ever the calculating businessman, didn't flinch, but his eyes narrowed as he saw his empire begin to crumble around him. "You can't do this," Helena screamed, her voice hysterical now as the officers moved in to cuff her. "You can't take me down. This is my family. It's my empire." Lucas watched as Helena was restrained, her power, her control, slipping away with every passing second. But it was Victor who remained the most dangerous, his icy calm unnerving even as he was led toward the waiting officers. As he passed Lucas, Victor leaned in close, his voice a deadly whisper. "This isn't over. You've won a battle, but the war is far from finished." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine as Victor was escorted away, but for the first time in what felt like years, he felt a sense of hope, a light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. The press conference erupted into chaos once again, but Lucas no longer cared. Helena and Victor were gone. The truth had been revealed, and for the first time, he felt like he could breathe again. Mia stood by his side, her hand slipping into his. She smiled at him, a real, genuine smile, one that spoke of relief, of resilience, of the bond they had forged through the fire of everything they had endured. "You did it," Mia said softly. "We did it," Lucas corrected, squeezing her hand. But even in this moment of victory, Lucas knew they weren't completely free. Victor's words still lingered in his mind, a haunting reminder that the forces behind this conspiracy were far-reaching and deeply entrenched. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges ahead. But now, Lucas and Mia were ready to face them together. As they stepped out of the press room into the fresh air of the city, Lucas turned to Mia, feeling a strange mixture of relief and resolve. "What now?" she asked, her voice light but full of meaning. Lucas looked out at the skyline, the weight of his family's past finally lifting. "Now we rebuild," he said, his voice steady. "Together." And as they walked away from the chaos, hand in hand, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. No longer victims of the past, but survivors ready to forge a new future. The Martins' family empire had fallen, but from its ashes, something new, something stronger, was about to rise. We hope you were moved and inspired by our story. We want to hear your opinion. Leave a comment below, share your impressions, and your own stories of resilience and hope. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our next emotional videos. Join us on this journey and follow more incredible stories. See you next time.